So today I want to just post about something that really annoyed me, and this is going to be another ranting video. So it's, if you guys don't want to listen to it, it's fine. You can skip this video. I just kind of want to rant about something. So today's my birthday, May 23rd, and some friends wish me happy birthday on my Facebook. Um, but guess what? My account's restricted. Look, I can't even like this post that my friend tagged me in. It's restricted for 3 days because it says your comment didn't follow our community standards on hate speech. And yeah, my account's restricted because I apparently posted something that was considered hate speech. Now you might be wondering, well, what did you post, right? So I'll show you guys what I posted. So again, my Facebook account is totally restricted on my birthday. I can't do anything. I can't like any posts. I can't comment on any posts. I can't do anything basically. I can't post in any groups. The only thing I can do on Facebook right now is just view stuff and then talk to people on Messenger. That's all I can do on Facebook right now. So it's just like totally restricted. And the reason why is because I made this comment on a post related to China. So there was a post made by SCMP, the South China Morning Post, which is this Hong Kong newspaper or news website. And I do follow it for Asian news. I follow Korea Times. I follow SCMP. I follow these news websites to get my information on Asian news, right? So I posted something in response to, you might be wondering what the article was. So I'll show you guys the original article. So this was the original article. I know it says Korea Times here, but the South China Morning Post also made a similar post about this, and that's the one I commented on. So the post is about this Oscar winner, Chloe Zhao, who won the Oscar, and she is known in China for criticizing China and being critical of the Communist Party in past interviews. And because of this, a lot of Chinese people are upset about her, and Chinese government actually censored her, or censored the Oscars, actually, the entire Oscars, just because of her. And, I had my thoughts about this. I said in my previous videos, I did a video, a 7-hour video actually, about the pro-Chinese bias on Quora. And yeah, I'm not an anti-Chinese person. It's just like I want to speak out the truth, right? And I feel like the truth right now is being suppressed, right? If you go on even Western social media, like Facebook or Quora, Twitter, like if you go on even Western social media right now, it feels like you can't say anything anti-Chinese. Like there's just Chinese bots and stuff like that that are going to downvote everything that's anti-Chinese. They're going to report anything that's anti-Chinese and only leave the anti-Western, anti-American stuff on there. And I showed this in my 7-hour Quora video. I had 7 hours of evidence of this. Okay, it's not just a small amount of evidence. I have 7 hours of evidence on this, right? That there are there are a lot of Chinese people. I don't know whether they're doing it for themselves or the Chinese government sent them. I don't know. Some people call them wumao, 50-cent army, whatever you want to call it. But there's a lot of Chinese people that make accounts on Western websites, use VPNs, of course, because they're banned in China. So they make VPNs, use VPNs, make accounts on these Western websites, and they just mass upvote everything that's anti-American, pro-Chinese, anti-Western, and then they mass downvote anything, report anything that's anti-Chinese, right? So that leads to a very skewed version of what you see online, right? And the moderation on Quora and the moderation on Facebook, they're also led by Chinese people, right? Because if you don't notice, there's a lot of Chinese engineers that are working at U.S. companies. So there are a lot of Chinese engineers working in Silicon Valley, right, in U.S. companies. So these Chinese people also control the moderation. So in essence, a lot of our even Western media stuff is controlled by Chinese, right? So a lot of these Chinese people, because there's so many of them, millions and millions of Chinese people, because there's so many Chinese, they make all these accounts and then they mass downvote, report anything that's anti-Chinese, leaving pretty much only pro-Chinese stuff and anti-Western stuff online, right? So this one, you can see that the comments, if you look at the comments for the South Chinese Morning Post, you'll see comments like this, right? You'll see stuff like this. Oh, propaganda win, nothing special, just a tool used by Americans. They let her win because they want to anger China, nothing new from the West. Like, you see comments like this, right? Like, they basically think there's a conspiracy theory against China, because Chinese people are really paranoid about, stuff that's anti-Chinese. So they think, oh, they let her win to anger China. And then this guy says, Oscar is nothing in China. What matters in China is the Golden Rooster Award. The U.S. standard is not international. You know, this is ironic, saying that the U.S. standard is not the international standard. Well, at least international people know about the Oscars. How many people outside of China know about the Golden Rooster Award, right? pretty much no one. I'm pretty sure a lot more people know about the Oscars than the Golden Rooster Award internationally. And it says, nobody give a fuck to the USA. USA should mind their own fucking business. So apparently these comments are fine, right? Nobody reported these. These are fine comments. They're allowed to exist. So guess what my comment was, right? My comment that somehow constitutes as hate speech. Okay, this is what I commented on that article. I said, so once you criticize China and China censored her, all the Chinese now hate on the Oscars and see it as a propaganda tool for America. This is true, right? I even saw the comments. You saw the comments, right? This is what they said. It's a propaganda tool. The one comment even said that. All because she criticized China in some old interviews, right? That's the reason why she hate her, why China doesn't like her. If she had not, they would all be praising her win and saying how Chinese is overtaking America. And I feel like this is true, right? If she did not criticize China, and like imagine if she didn't criticize China in her past interviews, China didn't censor her, right? And I mean, this is the reason why China censored her, right? It's because of her past rhetoric and interviews and stuff. If she didn't get censored and she won the Oscars, and I think all the Chinese people in Chinese Communist Party would be praising her, right? They'd be saying, oh, you know, Chloe's the best or whatever, and this is more proof that America is going down because, you know, Chinese are now winning the Oscars, and, you know, China's upcoming in the entertainment world now. Like, they'd be saying stuff like that, I'm pretty sure, guaranteed. Like, anytime China surpasses the US on something, Chinese people always have to brag about this and say that, oh yeah, look how great China's doing, or China's economy is so strong, like we're gonna overtake America soon, and you know, like America's going downhill because all the chaos and riots, and look how safe and harmonized and stable China is, right? They always take the opportunity to brag about this, right? So that's why I said if they had not, they'd be praising her wins, you know, China be overtaking America, and this constitutes as hate speech, right? And then my account got restricted because some Chinese nationalist reported this comment, and then the Facebook moderation, who I bet, you know, some Chinese engineers working the moderation, agreed with this. And I even appealed it, and they still agreed with it. So, yeah. I mean, this happened in Quora a lot too, right? I think in my 7-hour video, I also went over a lot of my Quora, I would say unreasonable removals, right? Because a lot of my comments got removed on Quora, which are very valid comments. You know, they just got removed because some Chinese user reported it. And then all the comments that are hating on America and like saying BS, basically, stuff that's not true, they are left on there. So, I mean, it just shows you how unfair things are, you know, on the online social media world right now. Even on Western websites. I'm not even going on the Chinese websites right now. I'm not going on Zhihu. I'm not going on Weibo, right? I'm not going on those websites because I'm pretty sure they're going to be worse. But even on the Western websites, you can't say anything that's anti-Chinese, like, or even remotely close to it, right? Like on Quora, in my 7-hour video, I showed all these examples of my comment getting removed. That's not even, like, it's nothing on there was false, right? I was just saying the truth, and I was coming up with evidence and everything, and they got removed. Quora moderation removed it, and they kept all the comments from Chinese people on there, which are all slandering America, slandering Korea, slandering Japan, you know, Taiwan, right? Hong Kong, right? I seen like all these comments about Chinese people calling Hong Kong people cockroaches, right? They call Hong Kong people cockroaches, and that's allowed to happen. Those comments are allowed to exist. Somehow that's not hate speech. How's that not hate speech, right? Like, how many times have I seen Chinese people online in Facebook and Quora, whatever, they call the Hong Kong protesters cockroaches, and they even want them to die, right? Basically, I've seen a lot of comments saying that basically they deserve to die because they're protesting. Like, and that's not hate speech, but somehow me saying this is considered hate speech, right? And like I've seen a lot of evidence, right? This is not considered hate speech. Like, this is all fine, but my comment's not fine. Like, this is what I'm talking about. There's a double standard going on here, and it's just everything, yeah, online, on Quora, whatever. I just feel like it's very skewed towards the pro-Chinese. Very skewed because, you know, in a way, a lot of things are run by Chinese, even the Western social media sites. That's what I feel, right? I mean, let's take a look at some of the other stuff on South China Morning Post, right? All right, so like this one, Hong Kong is strictly enforcing no dual nationality. So all the mainland regard as Chinese nationals, no matter what passport they hold. Let's look at the comments here, right? I bet there's going to be a lot more comments worse than mine, right? So let's see. Move to UK. That's your home country, made by a Chinese person. Oh man, dual citizenship equals double agent. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it can be worse. I mean, when the protests were happening in 2019, man, for Hong Kong, you can see all the hate comments from the mainland Chinese here. And also, I'm not saying it's only pro-Chinese people that are doing this. I mean, on here, you can obviously see some anti-Chinese posts as well. Like, yeah, there's definitely anti-Chinese posts here. But my point is, there's also a lot of anti-Hong Kong or anti-foreigner, anti-Western, anti-American posts too. It's both. There's just hate speech that in both ways, right? A lot of hate speech in both ways. So, oh, here we go. Cockroaches. There, I didn't have to scroll very long to find one that mentions cockroaches. I see a lot of Chinese people call Hong Kong people cockroaches. So there you go. Not hate speech. Those are totally fine. Let's look at another one. Let's see. Oh yeah, this one is a kind of a loaded one, right? Streets could be named Tiananmen Square, Hong Kong Road, Uyghur Court, and Tibet Hill to call out Chinese Communist Party's human rights violations. Let's look at the comments here. It should be fun. Yeah, this is actually my comment in here. It's great trolling. That's why I said Winnie the Pooh Street. That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh man, this is a burn, man. Beijing to Opium Road. Oh man, that's gonna piss off a lot of Chinese people. Oh, the comments here actually should be pretty. This is pretty fun. Because the Opium War was, the war in that the British beat China in, right? And that's how Hong Kong got taken from China in the first place, is because of the Opium War. Interesting. China should rename street close to British Embassy Opium King, Thief India Company, Guilo Street, Opium Court with a slave court. Interesting. But the Opium War is like one that the British won, right? So why would they rename that Opium Street? And it's something that happened in the 1800s too. I mean, if you want to talk about like Uyghurs and Tibet, Tiananmen happened fairly recently, but Opium War is something that happened in the 1800s. So this thing about the Opium War, I don't know if that's even like, I mean, it's funny. It's funny, but the Opium War is something that China lost, right? So it's a war that China lost. So I don't know how much sense it makes to rename something to a war that Chinese really feel humiliated about, right? It's part of the century of humiliation. So I'm not sure if that's actually a good idea for Chinese, brings up a lot of bad blood. Here we go. So China's NPC improves sweeping changes. Only patriots can rule the city. That's interesting. Let's see what the comments are. CCP totalitarian control. Some anti-CCP comments. RIP Hong Kong. So there's a lot of comments that goes both ways here, right? Some anti-Chinese, some anti-Western. Let's look at this one. Carrie Lam says the government doesn't want no unpatriotic people in the city's political system. Good decision. Well done, Carrie. No cockroaches in the government. See, it goes both ways, man. Yep. I mean, you're just looking for trouble when you're talking about anything related to Taiwan or Hong Kong. Yeah, just look at these comments, man. Unpatriotic Chinese. So what is patriotic Chinese? I think this is something that gets really confused by Chinese people here. Does patriotism mean supporting the government, whoever's in charge? or it doesn't mean fighting for what you believe is right, right? I think there needs to be a distinction made here. So I think what most Chinese people think of patriotism is you have to support the CCP. You have to support whatever the Chinese Communist Party says. That's being patriotic. But is it really being patriotic? What if you disagree with them and you believe that whatever they're doing is against the best interests of the people, or suppressing the freedom, free speech, all these things? Maybe that's not. Maybe that's against your best interests, right? And then maybe it's actually more patriotic to go against the CCP. Think about it that way, right? So what is patriotism? Patriotism is love for the country, right? Patriotism is love for the country. It's not love for the government that's in control of the country, right? I mean, if you look at the U.S., Donald Trump, who was in charge for the last 4 years until recently, right? A lot of people didn't like him because he was actually ruining the country, and people wanted him gone. And even though he was the head of the government, I don't think that people will say, "Oh, you're only patriotic if you support Donald Trump," right? I think people who are against Donald Trump are also patriotic because they knew that Trump is not good for the country. In the same way, I think Chinese people need to realize you don't have to. Patriotism doesn't mean that you have to support the current government, right? You can be against the current government because you believe that whatever they're doing is against the best interests of the country, and then if you go against that, go against the current government in that belief, then I actually believe that is also patriotic, right? In fact, I believe that is what the Communist Party, how the Communist Party, Mao Zedong, how they even started, right? I mean, think about it. If you look at the Kuomintang, right, the Kuomintang, back when they were in control of the country, Jiang Jieshi, right, Chiang Kai-shek was in control of the country, and how the Communist Party got started because they didn't believe that the Kuomintang was doing, the nationalist government was doing good for the country, right? So that's why the Communist Party got started, and they rebelled against the country because Mao Zedong believed that the Communist Party could do better for the people, right? So if you're talking about the patriotism, that means back then you would have had to support the Kuomintang. You would have had to support the nationalist government. Then that's the only way it was patriotic, right? If you're going against the government, then you're not patriotic, right? It doesn't make sense because now it's been flipped around. Now the Communist Party, only supporting the Communist Party, is patriotic. Well, back then, I guess Mao Zedong wasn't patriotic, right? Because he went against the government. But of course, think about patriotism in the big picture, right? I think believing that you can do better for your country because you love your country, that's patriotism, right? So Mao Zedong and the Communist Party started, and they gathered these supporters, right, to create the Communist Party. That happened because they believed that the current government in charge back then, wasn't doing enough for the people. That they could do better, right? So they were patriots in that sense, right? So even the Communist Party, they started out as patriots in that sense, but now it's kind of turned into the reverse, where the Communist Party now is in charge. And now if you go against the Communist Party, then you're not considered a patriot. You're considered a traitor to the country, right? Where a lot of people, Chinese people, call me a traitor because I don't support the CCP. But it doesn't make sense to me because that's how the CCP started. The CCP, the foundations of the CCP started because they didn't like the current government, right? They rebelled and created their own party to overthrow the current government at the time, right? And now you're calling me a traitor for not supporting the current government because I don't agree with the current government's policies? I mean, it's really ironic, right? Like, that's how Mao Zedong and the CCP started. It's because they didn't like the current government. And now I'm saying they disagreed with the current government's policies, and I'm disagreeing with the CCP's policies, but now I'm considered a traitor. Then you should consider Mao Zedong a traitor too, okay? Because that's exactly what he did. So that's the thing I don't understand, Chinese people, right? Is that they think if you go against the CCP, you're a traitor. No, it's patriotic to go against the CCP if you disagree with their policies. If you think that you could do better for the country, that's actually being patriotic. That's exactly what Mao Zedong did back in the day. So they don't understand this, man. Let's look at another one. Oh yeah, Hong Kong. Hong Kong people are going to leave HK and go to the UK, and it's, that's totally expected given what's happening in Hong Kong. Let's look at the comments here. Of course, you can see one for both sides here, right? Right, you're gonna see one from both sides. Pro mainlander, pro Hong Kong. Oh, here we go. South Cockroach Media Post. Oh, that's a good one. Like I said, they use cockroaches to describe Hong Kong people all the time. and that's not constituting hate speech. And meanwhile, what I said is hate speech. I mean, come on, half these comments would be gone if you know they were persecuted the same way my comment was. It's ridiculous. All right. Let's see. HK graduate UK. We shall celebrate a more civilized and peaceful HK after 5 years. The British government is doing wonderful things for mainland. They always accept Chinese criminals, hooligans, rebels, separatists. These people who are not needed by China, but they can also guide Britons to participate in the street revolution, blood washing, liberate. So this one is both going against Hong Kong people and also basically going against UK people as well, saying that, hey, we don't want these traitors, we don't want these terrorists, and they call them terrorists, by the way. You take them, and you take them off their hands, and I hope they ruin your country too. It's basically what this person's saying. It gets a lot of likes. Don't come back. Yeah, see, I mean, out goes the rubbish. 15 likes. I mean, bye-bye, don't come back. So you can see exactly all the pro-Chinese, kind of anti-Western comments on here. And none of this is considered hate speech, but my comment is, apparently. Good riddance. Alright, so most of these are like, yeah, good riddance, get out. Go ruin another country. See, good riddance, good riddance, good riddance. So, yeah, let's look at another post. Okay, let's see. Anti-China mouthpiece continues to spread propaganda. 10 likes. Exactly. I mean, it seems like the comments with the most likes on here are always pro-Chinese, and some are even going against this page, right? If anything, like this page is trying to you know, the South China Morning Post trying to report all the news from both sides. Whenever they report a news that's from the other side, then they're apparently anti-Chinese. Canada's the 51st state of the USA. You know, sometimes I do think like that. Oh man, American gangsters. American gangster mouthpiece. See, again, this is just trying to report a piece from the other side, and then this newspaper gets hate for it. Warmonger, U.S. regime. Exactly. So the thing is what is neutral and objective? I'm pretty sure every news company, like CNN, BBC, Fox News, New York Times, yeah, all these are biased, and everything. All news pieces are biased if you think about it, right? Is there any such thing as a neutral mouthpiece? No such thing, right? Because the thing is, this newspaper is just trying to report on both sides, but whenever they report on the side that you don't like, you're going to call them biased, right? So there's no such thing as a non-biased newspaper, because you're just going to call whatever you don't like biased. So yeah, there's no such thing as neutral and objective, right? Whatever they write, if, for example, like if they write something that's pro-China, right? Western people are going to say, oh, you're pro-Chinese biased. If they write something from the other side, right, then Chinese people are going to call this, oh, you're Western biased, right? So whatever they write, is going to be biased to something. So there's no such thing as a neutral newspaper, because it's always going to be considered biased by the people that don't like the pieces, right? So there's no such thing as a neutral one. I think every newspaper is, you know, is biased to something. So they always have to have an agenda. And even if they want to report on both sides, right, you're gonna get hate from both sides. So that's what I need. Look at this. Hong Kong is part of China, is only leased to England. Kind of true, but I mean, that's how war is, right? Like, can you say that about Texas, right? The U.S. annexed Texas. U.S. annexed Hawaii. Can you say that Texas and Hawaii are only leased to the U.S., right? And Hong Kong was part of the UK because the UK won, the British won the Opium War, right? It's just a part of the spoils of war, plain and simple, right? Can you say that Korea was leased to Japan, right? Because the Japanese invaded Korea. It's like saying you invade a country and then it's leased to you, right? So that part I'm not sure. I mean, you could say that least, and look, yeah, a whole bunch of likes for this comment because it's pro Chinese, but yeah, you could say that's least to you, but it doesn't really make sense, right? Because that's just how war works, right? That's just how war works. If you win, you take a piece of the territory. That's the spoils of war. Oh, Hong Kong belongs to China. It was never under democratic under British rule. Okay, I see. All Western nations combined. Many a Westerner still live in a fantasy world that they are still above equal. Ascendancy of China is a rule to make me. And I think I talked to this guy about different things before. The thing is, Chinese people have got to stop generalizing Westerners and putting them all into the same bucket. That's the thing I don't like. Is Chinese people complain, first of all, that Westerners are being brainwashed against them, brainwashed to hate them, and then saying, oh, you can't generalize Chinese and say this about Chinese, blah 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 blah. But then they go around and generalize all Westerners, so they're really being hypocrites here, right? Saying that, oh, all Westerners are like this. Do you really know every Westerner? Okay, Western countries, look at it. You're talking about Australia, Canada, New Zealand, obviously America, which I'm guessing most Chinese, what they're referring to Westerners, they're referring to America, UK, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, Eastern Europe, Norway, Sweden. Are you also referring to Mexico as well? So I guess Mexico is part of Western countries as well, right? You're referring to South America as well, Brazil, Argentina. That's all part of the Western hemisphere. So whenever Chinese people say Westerners, they're actually meaning like a whole bunch of different people, whole bunch of different ethnicities and cultures, and a whole bunch of different countries. So that's what I don't like. It's like you really got to generalize Westerners and say that all Westerners are like this, all Westerners are like that. Like that's not only is it being hypocritical, but it's way worse than someone generalizing Chinese, right? Because if you talk about 1.3 billion people, yes, that's 1.3 billion people, but it's controlled under a single party, right? A single party where 80-90% have approval of Xi Jinping, the current leader of China. So we kind of have a sense of what Chinese people are supporting here, right? But if you're generalizing Westerners, you're generalizing an entire hemisphere of people, all with different governments, all with different people, all with different cultures. Even in America, right? I mean, you got Democrats and Republicans, they think very differently and they support different things. So you're generalizing all these different people, whole swaths of different people, right? That's way worse than generalizing Chinese, okay? Because at least Chinese, like, they're all controlled by the same government, right? And we know that they have 80-90% approval of their government. So we kind of have an idea of how they think. But you can't just generalize the whole Western hemisphere and say that all Westerners are like this, right? It's an entire, all these different countries, all different governments, cultures, and whatever. How can you say that? And plus, Western people are, or Western cultures, right, is inherently individualistic, right? So everyone's so different from each other. One person might be very different from the next, right? Whereas Asian culture is kind of more, I would say it's more homogenous, right? More conformist, more homogenous. With Western culture, very individualistic. Every person is very different from each other. So the fact that if you generalize Westerners, it's way worse than generalizing Chinese or any other Asian, really, right? I think it's way worse, right? Because you're talking about all these different nations, different histories, different governments, different cultures, who are all individualistic, right? So you cannot generalize a whole bunch of different people like that, right? It doesn't make sense. Like Republicans and the Democrats can't agree on anything, let alone agreeing to hate on a country like China, right? So they always think, oh, all Westerners hate China, all Westerners are anti-Chinese or something like that. You can't say that. You're generalizing a whole bunch of different people here, right? So yeah, I really don't like it when Chinese people say like, yeah, all you Westerners are like this, or Westerners are like that, or yeah, you're brainwashed to hate China or something like that. Like, how can you say that, right? Have you met all different Westerners? And not only that, it's not only just Western countries. They actually also group Japan, Korea, Taiwan under the same kind of umbrella, right? Because Japan, Korea, and Taiwan, noticeably, they don't like China either, right? And they don't like China either, so China's reasoning for these people are like they're controlled by Western agents, right? And Hong Kong as well, I guess, for the protesters. They're saying, yeah, you're controlled by Western agents, or you're a puppet of the U.S., so it doesn't matter what you think, right? You're controlled by them. So basically, it's not even Western countries. It's basically all countries that don't like China, they think are brainwashed to hate them. They think it's a conspiracy, right? So Chinese people think there's a conspiracy out there, a vast conspiracy to bring down China, composed of all the Western nations and Korea and Japan and Taiwan. Like they're all joined together to bring down China. That's how they think, right? All these different people, different cultures and stuff. They have the same conspiracy. They all join together. It's some sort of master plan to bring down China. Like that's how Chinese people think, which is ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous. And yeah, like they put Japan, Korea, Taiwan under the same umbrella. It's crazy. When they say Westerners, you Westerners, they also mean Japan, Korea, Taiwan. You democratic countries, basically, is what they mean. You countries that use democratic system all think the same way, or you all hate China, whatever. Like it's ridiculous that you can generalize all these different people and cultures and everything, even within your own hemisphere, right? Even in Asia, you have a lot of countries that don't like China, right? Let's talk about India. They have problems with India. They have problems with Vietnam, with Korea and Japan, obviously, Taiwan, obviously, right? Like they have problems with all these different Asian countries around them. But of course, because now most of the countries around China don't like China, they have to make up some reason for them to hate China, right? So their excuse is just, yeah, Western agents are controlling you, or yeah, the American brainwashing got to you, or you're just a puppet state of the U.S. because they have military bases there. Like that's their argument and reasoning for for these countries not liking China. Like there can't be a real legit reason for countries not liking China, right? Oh, can't be a legit reason. No, everyone loves China. There can't be a real reason to hate China. So you must have been brainwashed to hate us, right? That's what they say to me too. Whenever I say something, that disagrees with what the CCP does, they're like, "No, you're a traitor. You're whitewashed. Like those Western people must have turned you against us." Really? I didn't know that. So I'm brainwashed by Canadians? I guess so, right? Like just using my own individualistic thinking, right? Just doing my research here. I guess that makes me brainwashed or something like that. It's like basically just whatever argument is that is against China. They just throw it out. Think it's not legit. There's no way you cannot like China, right? Everyone loves China. There's no way you can hate it, right? The only reason you would hate it is if you're brainwashed by Western agents, by Americans, right? You've been brainwashed by the Western media to hate China, or someone was racist to you when you were young, or like must have treated you the wrong way to make you hate your own culture and hate your own country or something like that, which I don't, by the way. I don't hate Chinese culture. I don't hate China. I just disagree with the CCP's policies, okay? I just disagree with the CCP's policies, which I already said earlier in this video, does not mean I'm a traitor. It actually, I think, means that I'm patriotic, if anything, right? But anyways, Chinese people are like, yeah, if you go against the current government controlling China, then you're a traitor, and you must have been brainwashed to hate us, because there's no way you can hate us with a legit reason, right? No, you must have been brainwashed, like, or you don't know China well enough. There's no way. Like, and I visited China several times, by the way. I traveled there many times, just like I traveled to Korea and Japan and Taiwan. Traveled to most of Asia, a lot of Asian countries. I wouldn't say most. I still have to visit Thailand, but still, I mean, sure, if you want to think that way, everyone who doesn't like your country must have been brainwashed to hate your country. No way that they must have a legit reason to hate your country, right? Or gee, maybe it must have been, I don't know, that China's being a bully, that they're accusing America of things that they're doing themselves. Like they accuse America of being warmongers, and then they build up their military, or they accuse America of being a bully, and then they bully other countries economically, right? I don't know. Maybe it might be something related to that. Maybe related to being a big hypocrite. That might be some reason why people legitimately don't like China. But, Chinese people don't think about this. They're like, no, you must have been brainwashed. Okay, whatever. So, anyways, yeah, that's why my account was restricted on my birthday. Can't even like my post. I mean, I can go on. I got this Quora post I made. Me and my friend already went over. Me and my friend already did a podcast about this, about China claiming kimchi as Chinese and not Korean, which is absolutely ridiculous, right? Because, here's kimchi, here's pao cai. Are they the same? Of course not, right? Look how different they are. I mean, and I can go on like sunsai, sauerkraut. Yeah, this is all fermented cabbage, but it's not like China invented fermented cabbage, right? China didn't invent fermented cabbage, so like these are just different ways of preparing fermented cabbage, right? Just because you have the same base ingredient doesn't mean that they're the same food, right? So I mean, kimchi obviously very different from Cai. They use different ingredients, and they're prepared differently. So it doesn't make sense for Chinese people to claim that kimchi is Chinese, right? And I can keep going on about this stuff. Um, this is from one of those Quora answers that I got really annoyed about. This is one of those top voted answers because it was pro-Chinese, of course. I already had a whole video on why pro-Chinese answers get the most love on Quora. But yeah, this is another guy. He says stuff like, if you know anything about Korean nationalism, and it says racist mark like China always steals uncivilized pig. Really? And this guy, I've already pretty much confirmed, this guy has never been to Korea, and I bet he doesn't have any Korean friends, right? So if he actually went to Korea and talked to Korean people, he would know that there's not that many, like, I think there's this misconception that about from Chinese that there's a lot of Korean nationalists, which there really isn't, right? So in my experience, there's been way more Chinese nationalists online than Korean nationalists, okay? Even on Quora, like you kind of struggle to find a Korean nationalist on here, but you see so many Chinese nationalists right here, right? And on just social media in general, right? Western social media, you have way more Chinese nationalists using VPNs than Korean nationalists, right? Who don't have to use VPNs to use Western social media, right? Yeah, and I just never really met a Korean nationalist. I lived in Korea for 2 years. Most of my friends are Korean. I've never met any Korean nationalists, right? And they say this stuff. Claim Korea being the origin of China. Claim that Confucius being Korean. Claim Chinese written letters as Korean heritage. Claim Chinese New Year. Like, none of this is true. I've never met any Korean in my life saying any of these things, right? And I even asked my friend about this, like, yeah, what do you learn in school? And he said, yeah, we learned that Confucius is Chinese. We learned that we used to use Chinese characters, right? But then King Sejong the Great invented the Hangul language so that we can use the Korean alphabet, which is why King Sejong is one of the Korea's most revered emperors, right? So, yeah, it's like, of course, none of this is true. If you talk to any Koreans, like they'll be like, what are you talking about? And I met a lot of Koreans who lived in China before, and they're like, why is everyone asking me if I think Confucius is Korean? And I was like, because I don't know, because of some stupid internet rumor. That's why. Like, none of this is true because this is just what Chinese people believe without talking to any Koreans, without going to Korea at all to see if it's actually true. They just blindly believe this crap, right? So yeah, it's ridiculous. There's a church in Korea claiming Jesus is Korean. Again, you have to understand that there's going to be some portion of the population that's kind of crazy, right? That's kind of off kilter. I mean, in the U.S., this is called the alt-right, right? And you even have neo-Nazis in the U.S. But whoever there's a church in Korea claiming Jesus is Korean, that's not a mainstream thing, okay? Whoever is claiming Korea being the origin of Chinese, that's not a mainstream thing, okay? This is like probably a handful of people, at most, I'm guessing. Probably like a handful of people at most, but the vast majority of Koreans do not believe this crap, right? Just go to Korea, talk to any Korean person. The vast majority of Koreans do not believe any of this crap, right? And he says, oh, it's generally made by some Koreans. How can you say it's generally made by some Koreans? I never even heard this even made by one Korean, right? It's more like one out of like, I don't know, like a million. It's like one out of like a million Koreans probably think this, right? It's not even some. It's like really rare to find a Korean that believes any of this shit. So yeah, that's the problem with Chinese, is that they believe all this false stuff about Koreans. And the irony of saying that Koreans are more nationalistic when, you know, you see Chinese nationalists like everywhere, which I've already demonstrated in this video and in my 7-hour Quora video, how many Chinese nationalists there are online, right? This one, Yoon Dongju, who is a ethnic Korean born in China, who can claim him? I mean, this is the difference between ethnicity and nationality. But it also depends on later nationality, because I believe Yoon Dongju moved to Korea later on and died in South Korea. So I would say that he was ethnically Korean, and then he was born in Korea, and then he died. It's kind of like me saying like it's kind of like if I'm born in China, but I'm Canadian, like if I'm white, right? If I'm Canadian but I'm born in China and then I later moved back to Canada and I grew up there. So am I Chinese or am I Canadian? I'm pretty sure most people say I'm Canadian, right? But in this case, yeah, I'm pretty sure most people say Yun Dongju is Korean, right? Um, because he was born in China. That's really the only tie he has to China is that he was born in China. But he's ethnically Korean, and then he moved to Korea later on in his life. And oh yeah, look at this comment. Korea has no culture. Their culture is Chinese culture. Yeah, jeez, that comment's okay. My comment gets me restricted. This comment's apparently okay, and look how many people like it too. So it's ridiculous. And then I have other examples of Chinese being just the most sensitive people on earth. Look at this. Chinese social media users don't like this cartoon for disrespecting China. I think it's like a Korean cartoon. Look how cute she is. But apparently banned. Disrespected China too much. If you wear Korean hanbok, it's considered like a lot of Chinese people, just like with the kimchi. Chinese people, like it's ironic again because Chinese people think that Koreans like to claim everything is Korean. Well, I have so much evidence here that Chinese people like to claim everything is Chinese. I mean, look at this, right? With the kimchi stuff, that's one thing. Me and my friend already did a podcast about it, right? There's obviously evidence of Chinese people claiming that kimchi is Chinese. But the hanfu thing too, right? Korean hanbok, right? Which is derived from Chinese hanfu. But it's not the same thing. It's not stolen from them, right? Like, it's just their clothing which is inspired from Chinese clothing, right? And I think this is the thing that Chinese people don't get is that in ancient Asian history, everyone around China was pretty much inspired or influenced by them in the same way that everyone around the Roman Empire was influenced by the Roman Empire, right? Whenever you have a really powerful nation, like right now you have America as a very powerful nation, as a superpower, right? A lot of other nations are going to be influenced by it, right? And China itself is actually very influenced by America, right? If you look at China's startup culture, there's Silicon Valley culture right now, entrepreneur culture right now. If you look at the fast food that's been going underway in China, like all the fast food restaurants, their clothing, they pretty much just wear Western clothing now, right? They wear American clothing. All that's been influenced by America. So it's weird that Chinese people would, say, oh, yeah, everything that's been inspired or influenced by us, no, you stole that from us, right? Like it's kind of weird to say that when this is just how history works, right? When you have smaller nations, they're basically influenced by you. That's basically how it works, right? Like I don't see people from the UK or Germany say to an American, hey, you stole our culture, right? Hot dogs, hamburgers, all that, you stole that from us. Like I don't hear that, right? So this is just how history works. I think Chinese people don't understand this. This is how history works. They don't steal things. It's really influential, right? If you're a very powerful, influential country in your history, of course you're going to influence smaller countries, right? That's just how history works, right? I don't hear people from the UK or Germany or these countries, all these immigrants that came to the U.S. brought their culture with them, right? And then I don't hear anyone saying that, oh, Americans stole our culture, right? I don't hear that. I don't hear from France or UK that, hey, Canadians stole our culture. I don't hear that, right? In China, same thing. Like a lot of Chinese actually did go to Japan and Korea and brought their culture with them, right? But other than that, I mean, if you consider Korea as a tributary state for a lot of its history, it's not, I wouldn't say it, some Chinese actually think that Korea was part of China, which is not true. It was just a tributary state, right? It was independent. It had to just pay tribute to the Chinese emperor. That was it. But it wasn't really like part of China. And yeah, that's still like it doesn't mean that they stole your history, right? Obviously, you're going to be influenced by the country that's right beside you. That's just how history works. And so all the evidence I've seen so far are of Chinese people claiming everything as theirs, basically. Taiwan, same thing. I talked about this before in my podcast with my friend. Just because Taiwan was part of your country before doesn't mean that it's, always part of your country forever, right? That's not how it works. Like, sure, Taiwan was part of the Qing Empire, okay? And then they lost it to Japan, right? After Japan beat them in the war. And now they claim it as it rightfully belongs to China. right? But that's just like I said with the spoils of war thing. They think Hong Kong belongs to them because it was used to be part of their territory, right? And it was taken by the British after the war. Taiwan, same thing, taken by Japan, used to belong to them. But you can't just say, it used to be part of your territory, so it always belongs to part of your territory. That's not how it works, because that's how war works, right? I mean, going by this logic, everything would be almost like half the world would be part of the British Empire still, right? I don't see any British people claiming, hey, India, that belongs to us, right? Or Canada, U.S., that belongs to us because it used to be part of our territory, right? Like, it's ridiculous to claim something like this, right? If you lost it through a war, you lost it. That's how war works, right? It's no longer part of your territory because you lost it due to a war, right? You lost it to Japan, right? In Taiwan's case, the previous government moved there, right? The Republic of China's government moved there. If it's not under your control anymore, right? Because it's the different government controlling it. So, yeah, and the same thing with Manchuria. Actually, I heard there's a lot of Chinese that still believe that just because Manchuria is currently a part of China, and I'm a Manchurian, right? I can say this. I was born in Manchuria, and my blood is Manchu. So, give me my opinion on this. I was born in Shenyang, which is part of Liaoning province. This the province right next to North Korea. Yeah, and I can say that there are Chinese people that think that just because Manchuria is now part of China, and it was part of the Qing dynasty, right? That means it must have been part of China like years and years ago, right? In ancient past, right? That's not how it works, right? So, my territory, the Manchurian territory, right? It's part of current day China, and it's part of the Qing Empire before this. But before the Qing Empire, it was actually controlled by Manchurians. Before that, it was controlled by Jurchens. Before that, it was controlled by Khitans. Before that, it was controlled by this Proto-Korean kingdom called Goguryeo, right? So it's been controlled by a number of different states, but it definitely wasn't Chinese until the Qing Empire, right? Took over the Qing dynasty. So before then, it was controlled by other states, right? So you can't say that just because it's part of China now that it was part of China before. So they're saying like, yeah, that's our territory or something like that. Even back then, I was like, no, that's not true. That's revisionist history, right? Like it was part of Goguryeo, and Goguryeo is a Pan-Asian territory. It's a Proto-Korean kingdom, and I know it's not part of China because China actually fought a war with them, right? The Sui dynasty and Tang dynasty, they tried to invade Goguryeo many times and failed, and of course they had to team up with Shilla, which is another Proto-Korean dynasty, Proto-Korean kingdom, to try to take it down, right? If it was part of if it was part of China back then, they wouldn't have needed to invade that territory, right? So it's ridiculous to consider Goguryeo part of or even Balhae part of Chinese territory when there was the concept of China was limited to just whatever Tang controlled back then, right? It's whatever the Tang dynasty controlled back then, which did not include Manchuria back then, okay? Did not include Manchuria until the Qing dynasty, which is like years and years later. It's like 1,000 years later, basically. So yeah, don't talk to me about Manchuria being part of China back then. That's revisionist history. It didn't happen, right? It was part of a different territory. Different kingdoms, different states controlled it back then. So it's just revisionist history to consider it part of Chinese territory just because you control it now, right? You say the same thing about Tibet too, but I do consider Tibet part of current Chinese territory. But again, before that, before China controlled and took over Tibet, it was its own territory. So before that, you just can't revise history like this, right? That's not how history works. And just going down this list. So yeah, what Chinese people say about Koreans being all nationalists and stuff and claiming everything as theirs, I've experienced exactly the opposite, right? I've never talked to any Koreans that believed that all these, that they think that everything is theirs. I never met any Koreans that said that, right? If they do say that, it's something that they appropriated from a different culture, or they were influenced by a different culture, in the same way that, say, Americans took hamburgers and hot dogs and pizza and stuff like that and made it themselves, made it their own, right? They took it from other countries and made it their own, right? So Chinese took, kimchi, and they took, like Lunar New Year would be an example. These are things that are they're borrowed from China because China was the most influential country back then, right? So they're borrowing these things from China, and then and the Hanbok is another one, right? They took the Hanfu, borrowed it, kind of made it their own, right? And that's really how cultures do this in history, right? They take influence from different cultures, from more powerful cultures, and then they make it their own. So yeah, I don't think I met any Koreans that really though claimed that it was originally Korean. I've never met any Koreans who said that. But on the other hand, I've already seen lots of evidence of Chinese people claiming that this and that was Chinese, right? They try to claim everything is Chinese. So I've experienced the opposite, right? Oh yeah, and Chinese claim samgyetang is also there as well, not just kimchi. So they claim samgyetang, which is another dish that Korea, again, like I said, just like Americans taking pizza or hot dogs, hamburgers, Korea took some stuff from China, made it their own, right? It doesn't mean they stole it, right? So you can't just that would be like Italians, claiming that American pizza is theirs. Well, no, they obviously came originally from Italy, but Americans have their own version of it, right? And Korean samgyetang, that's their own version, right? You can't claim it as yours because that's their version. Of course, you can probably say originated from China or something, but you can't say that this is now Chinese. You can't say that. And look at all these comments. Like or not, Korean were servant of China. South Korean is a U.S. colony. Nothing China should do about it. Like all these comments and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I guess they're totally okay to put out there. Meanwhile, my comments are the ones that get flagged. Right? South Park banned from the Chinese internet because they had an episode like with Winnie the Pooh or something like that. Barbie, Peppa Pig, My Little Pony, dangerous for kids. Like yeah, like it just shows you how sensitive Chinese people are right now. All these boycotts going on. So now apparently anything, if you're a company, you have to openly praise the party. You cannot undermine the glory of the party. We're going back to Mao Zedong era now. You've got to carry a little red book now full of Xi Jinping's quotations. Otherwise, you can get in trouble. Chinese government has introduced a licensing system. It forces new games to include communist ideology and contribute to promoting Chinese culture. Again, we're going back to Mao Zedong era times where you have everything has to praise, communism in the CCP party, which is ironic because, the reason why China kind of developed on this really fast pace and became really, give China credit for growing so fast, but give the CCP, credit for growing so fast, but the reason why they grew so fast is because they actually rejected communism, right? They actually rejected the ideology of communism, the centrist economy, and they moved in favor of a capitalist economy, and that's really how they grew. So it's ironic now that they're going back to this communism thing, and really it's not because of communism at all that they grew. It's actually because they decided to move away from communism, right? They decided to move away from communism and become a market economy, a capitalist economy. That's how they grew so fast, right? Before then, they were really not growing that much, and then obviously you have what we call mistakes, like the Great Leap Forward, obviously a huge mistake, right? Famine killed millions and millions of Chinese people. Cultural Revolution, right? It really stagnated Chinese culture, brought them back like 100 years. Well, actually, not more than that probably, because they destroyed a whole bunch of Chinese artifacts, and they burned a lot of books, scholars' books, and they just persecuted scholars during that time. They closed all the universities. So my parents lived through the Cultural Revolution, and it's just something that obviously a mistake. All these things came during the communist era, the really communist era of the CCP, right? It's only when they moved away from this communism stuff, then they started to grow, right? Then they moved away from this pure dictatorship stuff, right? The Stalinist, the Maoist ideology, and then they started to grow and become, that's how you see, whenever you hear Chinese praising the CCP saying, we lifted 600 million people out of poverty or something like that, that only happened because China opened up to the market, right? They opened up to a capitalist economy. That's why, right? If it wasn't for that, if they kept doing this communist stuff, then they would have just been like North Korea, basically, like a bigger version of North Korea. So, yeah, you look at North Korea now. That's basically what would have happened if China did not move to a market economy, right? So it's ironic now that they're like, no, you got to go back to praising communist ideology and stuff like that. I was like, this is the whole reason, right, you were down in the first place. The whole reason why where China was falling behind in the first place was because they were communist, right? It's only when they moved away from the communism then they grew, right? And now they're going back. So it's crazy. Um, yeah. So I actually want to share this conversation too. I had a WeChat conversation with this girl, and this is another example of how sensitive Chinese people are. Had this conversation with a girl, and she randomly added me on WeChat, and she said, I think the conversation got around to Korea and Japan because I said I traveled to Korea and Japan, and I really liked. I found the cultures really interesting because it was like a mix of some aspects of Western culture with some aspects of ancient Chinese culture, right? Which it is. Japan has some aspects of Tang Chinese. Korea has some aspects of Ming Chinese in their culture, and this goes back to their uninterrupted history, basically. Uh, and whereas China, modern day China, is quite a bit different from the way that China was before. So that's why it's really interesting how Korea and Japan kind of preserved these elements of Chinese culture, and then she was like, no, these countries stole from our culture or something. I don't like these two countries. And then she said, every person of Chinese descent or Chinese blood should not forget about history, and don't forget about 918. And I was like, what's 918? Now, I already told her, by the way. I told her that I was a Chinese Canadian. I was raised in Canada. I was born in China, but I was raised in Canada, so I don't know what 918 is, right? I'm not educated about that. So I said, what's 918? And then I said, if it's about the World War II stuff that Japan did to China, I understand that. I understand the rape of Nanking. I understand all the experiments that Japanese did on Chinese people, all the Chinese people that they slaughtered. I understand that, and I understand why Chinese people hate Japanese or Japan because of it, but I don't understand why Chinese people hate Korea, right? Why do you hate on Korea because of it? If it's about Koreans, killing Chinese as part of the Japanese army, that's not their fault. They were forced to be part of the Japanese army because Korea was a colony of Japan at the time. And this is just history. You gotta learn your history, right? Korea was a Japanese colony at the time. So, and Korea really fought hard for its independence, right, by the way. And they were brutally suppressed by Japanese every time. And Korea actually suffered a lot from Japan, right? Like, unlike Taiwan, which actually has good relations with Japan because of what the Japanese government did, Korea does not have a good relationship with Japanese government because the Japanese government committed a lot of atrocities while Korea was colonized by it, right? So while Korea was a colony, I mean, Japan just committed many crimes, and you see all the sex slaves, the comfort women, stuff like that. Yes, many were Chinese, but I think a lot, maybe even the majority of them were Korean women who had to undergo that kind of stuff. So yeah, and a lot of Koreans were killed, slaughtered under the Japanese. So Korea really hates Japan, right? Koreans don't like Japanese. Korea doesn't like Japan. So to say that Korea, that's Korea's fault somehow for killing Chinese, for being part of Japanese armies, I think that's irrational to say that. You can't hate on Korea for something they were not in control of, right? It's not like the citizens wanted to be part of the army. It's not like the citizens wanted to kill people, right? They were conscripted to be part of the army because they were part of Japan at the time, right? So you can't blame that on Korea. And Korea and China have never, I would say this actually, Korea has never invaded China in its history, right? Korea has never done anything wrong to China in its history, right? If you look at the history, Korea's never ever invaded China or any other country for that matter. Korea's always kept to itself. China, on the other hand, tried to invade Korea many times, right? We see this in the Tang Dynasty after they helped Shilla defeat Goguryeo. We've seen this during the Qing Dynasty. Actually, the Ming and the Chosun Dynasty were quite close to each other, but the Qing Dynasty, the Manchurian Qing Dynasty, kept trying to invade Chosun, right? So that was an issue as well. The Yuan Dynasty with the Mongols, obviously, if you read history, they subjugated Korea. Korea became a vassal state during that time. The only time they became a vassal state was when the Mongolians were in charge. So that was during the Yuan Dynasty. After that, Korea went back to being a tributary state. And then more recently, seen with the Korean War, I can say this, literally China is the reason why Korea is divided right now, right? We see North Korea and South Korea originally divided by the US and Soviet Union after the war, but the Korean War happened because North Korea invaded South Korea, right, with the backing of the Soviet Union. And then Korea asked for America's help, right? So America stepped in, then they pushed the North Korean forces to the Chinese border. And they were about to invade China, and then China stepped in and then defended itself and pushed North Korea, back. I mean, help North Korea and push South Korean forces and U.S. forces back down to the original border, right? So I totally understand this, right? I understand why Chinese had to do this because Americans were about to invade them. They're right on the edge of their border, so I understand why they had to kind of help the North Koreans. But I mean, it's just a fact that China was instrumental in dividing South Korea and North Korea, right? Because if it wasn't for them, literally Korea would have been united, right? Korea would have been unified if not for Chinese army, right? Because they were the ones who pushed South Koreans and American forces back. So China has done a lot of things to Korea, right? And Korea has never done anything to China, right? So I don't understand why Chinese hate Koreans. It just doesn't make sense to me. And to this day, I don't like. I've been around a lot of Koreans, right? Lived in Korea, talked to a lot of Koreans. I haven't met any Koreans that really hated China, right? I mean, the most I get is okay. Some of the yellow dust, the smog, that comes into Seoul sometimes, and then it makes the air really bad to breathe. And then some of them blame that on China. And then of course the Chinese tourists, who have a bad reputation no matter where they go. It doesn't matter. It's not just Koreans actually. Just no matter where they go, they have a bad reputation for being like loud and obnoxious, right? So that's not just Korea, but that's pretty much it. I never really hear any Koreans saying outright, "Oh, I hate Chinese" or "I hate China." In fact, Chinese is the second most studied foreign language in Korea after English, right? So yeah, I haven't really met any Koreans that really like hate China for irrational reasons, but I have met Chinese that hate Korea for irrational reasons for pretty much no reason, right? And this girl is like one of them. She just hated Korea and lumped it in with Japan into one bucket. So I was asking like, it's not fair to. I was saying like I understand why you hate Japan, but I don't understand why you would hate Korea, because it's not Korea's fault that they fought they fought as part of the Japanese army, that they were forced to, right? And Korea has never done anything to China in its history. So I don't understand why you hate Korea. I understand why you hate Japan, but I don't understand why you hate Korea. And then all she said was, maybe we can't be friends anymore. And I was like, okay. And I was like, and she said, yeah, go read the news more or something like that. And she never really even, responded to me about that. So just goes to show how sensitive you are, right? Like she didn't even bother to explain to me what 918 was, right? At least explain to me what it is, because I told you I was educated in Canada. I don't know what 918 is. And then she said, no, you have to know what 918 is. If you don't know, we can't be friends. If you don't share my irrational hate for the countries that I don't like, then we can't be friends. And it's stupid, right? That's like me saying to a Chinese person, hey, if you don't know about the War of 1812, then we can't be friends. Like, it's like, how can you expect me to know what 918 is when I told you that I grew up in Canada and you don't even bother to explain it to me, and you just say we can't be friends if I don't know about it? It's ridiculous, right? How freaking sensitive can you be, right? And then she basically blocked me and stopped talking to me after that, which I find is crazy. My friend also had a similar experience. My friend Eric had a similar experience when he was talking to this girl from Shanghai, and yeah, all he said was like, he said his dad was from Shanghai and his mom was from Hong Kong or something like that. And then the girl says, yeah, don't lump in Hong Kong with Guangdong or something like that. And he never said anything about Guangdong at all. So it's just like, it shows you how crazily like sensitive Chinese people are, how nationalistic they are to bring these kind of things in the conversation. Like, yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, it's me telling a Chinese person, hey, if you don't know this thing about Canadian history, then we can't be friends. Doesn't make any sense, right? Just because I'm a Chinese descent or Chinese blood, right? I grew up in Canada, obviously don't know what this is, right? Like, at least tell me. Don't just tell me to look at the news or something like that. At least tell me, give me the courtesy to tell me what it is, and then before saying we can't be friends because of it, like, that's dumb, right? She never gave me an answer on why she hated Korea. Like, that's just irrational hatred, right? And you can see how sensitive Chinese people are. Look at all the brands they're boycotting right now. All the foreign brands that they're boycotting. This is all the foreign brands they're boycotting because of the Xinjiang cotton thing. Because a lot of foreigner brands, they're not using Xinjiang cotton because of the genocide and Xinjiang re-education stuff for the Uyghurs that's been happening there. I don't take a side in that issue. I don't know whether or not, because there's so many conflicting reports, just like there is for a lot of these stories, right? Always a lot of conflicting reports from Chinese sources and Western sources, right? So I don't really take a side in this. But anyways, again, because the Chinese people are super nationalistic, super sensitive. So whatever foreign country doesn't really, offends them in some way, which is very easy to do. And Chinese people get offended very easily. As you can see with my conversation with that girl, they get offended very easily. Um, yeah, immediate boycott, right, of the brand. That's what happens. So you wonder why, and Chinese people wonder why people don't like them. Like, they wonder why people don't like China, and they must have been, you're brainwashed to hate China. You're a traitor. You must have been traitor. Really? So is there no legitimate reason why people don't like China? I see. It must have been that I'm brainwashed. Yeah, that's it. I'm brainwashed to hate China. Right? It couldn't have been like the fact that you're super sensitive, super nationalistic, trying to claim everything as yours. Yeah, it couldn't have been bullying other countries, right? Like Korea banning K-pop because of the THAAD, right? Just because they accepted the U.S. anti-missile defense system, then you ban all the Korean exports. Korean entertainment is all banned from your country. Yeah, that might have been bullying behavior, don't you think? But yeah, like you don't think that there's a legitimate reason to hate your country or to not like your country? Like, come on now. Like this entire video, I've given so many reasons why people have a genuine, legitimate reason to dislike China and Chinese people, right? Calling other people cockroaches, being bullies, being hypocrites, right? Saying, always playing the victim, right? Chinese people always play the victim, say that, oh, we're the ones that's being bullied. It's America's fault. It's the Western people's fault. Yeah, we're the ones being bullied. Like, and then they go around and bully all the Asian nations and stuff like that with, economic policies, boycotting stuff. Like, give me a break. Come on now. Like, China playing the victim, like, seriously? Like, yeah, this is us. We're retaliating for the century of humiliation. Yeah. And yeah, that's being a bit hypocrite. Like, you just accused America of being a warmonger, and now you're doing the same thing, and you're using the century of humiliation and America's past. Yeah, I understand America's not perfect. Yeah, there's the Trail of Tears. Yeah, the Japanese internment. Yeah, China's Exclusion Act. Yeah, I understand all that. America's not perfect, okay? But at least some Americans realize this, right? Some Americans realize this already, that they did bad stuff in their past, right? Obviously, a lot of racism going on in America, police brutality, right? All the stuff like the violence against minorities, right? All these things happen in America. Yeah, America's not perfect, but at least some Americans recognize this and acknowledge this, whereas no Chinese people I've met have ever acknowledged that they're being hypocrites about this, right? That they're accusing America of doing all this stuff, like, brutality, violence, warmongering, and then they go around and bully other countries. Maybe not in the same way, maybe not invading them or anything like America does, but still bullying them economically, right? By boycotting them, being super sensitive. Yeah, like that's bullying behavior, right? It's still bullying behavior, and you're using century of humiliation plus America's past aggressions, transgressions as basically justification for doing what you're doing now. So that's basically the epitome of hypocrisy there, and you're not acknowledging that, right? And then Chinese people really say, oh, Americans are the ones who are hypocrites. At least some Americans recognize that Americans have committed these atrocities in the past. In fact, half of America probably knows that, right? Because we know that the Iraq War was actually very unpopular, right? We know the Vietnam War was actually very unpopular too, right? So a lot of Americans realize this. Like half of Americans are against the stuff that America does, right? And Chinese people, they just think that, oh, all Americans, they're hypocrites and they don't realize this stuff. No, half of Americans do realize this stuff, right? Whereas it seems like every Chinese that I've talked to or that you see online, they don't seem to realize that they're being the biggest hypocrites in the world while also calling Americans hypocrites. So, yeah. Anyways, that's just my rant for today. I know it's a long rant, but all it came from was me trying to like my own post on Facebook and not being able to because of stupid restrictions that Facebook and put on me because, yeah, it's my birthday. I'm just trying to like my own post, my own goddamn post on Facebook. I can't even do that because some stupid Chinese nationalist out there got pissed off because of what I said. Super sensitive, of course, got super defensive about everything, just like most of these Chinese netizens do. Whenever I post like anything that could be misconstrued or construed as negative against China, they get super sensitive, they get super defensive about it, and then they report me, and yeah, and now I can't post or like or do anything on Facebook for the next 3 days. So just wanted to rant about that. I think it's really unfair, and just a continuation of why even though I'm ethnically Chinese, I do like China, like, the country, but I don't necessarily agree with the CCP's policies, nor do I really in agreement with what Chinese people are doing these days, mainly being super nationalistic and super sensitive to basically everything. So that's the thing I'm kind of worried about and concerned about. So that's why I made this video. So guys, if you listen through this entire rant, you have a lot more patience than most people do. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and thanks for listening to my little rant. And let me know in your comments if you agree, right? If you've seen like a lot of Chinese nationalists online, I definitely have seen much more Chinese nationalists than before, compared to, say, the Hu Jintao era, right? I think this Xi Jinping has really removed the term limits and really consolidated much more power than any of his predecessors. And when I was in China, I really saw like how much propaganda and security and everything. He really expanded his powers, and it just seems to me that he's basically Mao Zedong 2.0, and that we're now in a Cold War 2.0. America versus China is basically the Cold War 2.0, right? It used to be America versus Soviet Union. That was the first Cold War. Now it's America versus China. I do think that we're almost in a Cold War 2.0, right? With the anti-Chinese stuff coming from Americans and the anti-American stuff coming from Chinese people, right? That's what I've observed so far. So it's almost like we're in a second Cold War right now. So yeah, and I do think like Xi Jinping is pretty much becoming like the next Mao Zedong. So it's crazy. Like, definitely I've seen much more nationalism come from Chinese people these past few years compared to before. And yeah, like calling other people hypocrites, calling other people nationalist, calling other people nationalistic, and saying that other people are claiming things as theirs when you're the one. Like, I've seen way more Chinese than every other nationality combined, right, saying this kind of stuff, right? Claiming stuff as Chinese, being hypocrites, being nationalistic. Like, come on, man. And just to be clear here, right, like I said, I think I'm being patriotic here when I criticize the CCP, because, like I said, when you criticize the government because you think that they're not doing something good enough for the people, or you think that they can change something for the better, that's actually love for country, because you want to make your country better, right? Now, I do like China, right? I do care about China, and that's why I criticize the CCP, because I want them to be a better country, right? So Chinese people think you're being a traitor or something like that, you're Hanjian. Well, the thing is, you got to think about what your definition of patriotism is, right? I care about my country enough to actually criticize it because I want to make it better, okay? So I'm saying this to Chinese people in China. We've seen what happened before in history, right? With the Qing Dynasty, what happened when Chinese people got too arrogant, they lost their humility. They started, closing themselves up, being, super protectionist. And what happened in Qing Dynasty? They fell behind. They fell behind the Western powers, and they fell behind Japan, who was the first Asian country to industrialize. And of course, that's why you ended up with the Century of Humiliation. The Century of Humiliation was directly caused by Chinese being too arrogant and protectionist, which is exactly what's happening now. So we've seen this repeat. History repeats again, right? Qing Dynasty, first part of the dynasty is great, right? With Kangxi, Qianlong, economy was great, fine. Second half of the dynasty, they got too arrogant, too protectionist, and then you have Western powers overtaking China, industrializing, right? So that's why Chinese lost against British, lost against French, lost against Japan, right? So yeah, and that's what led to the Century of Humiliation, and now we're happening again, because Chinese people lost their humility again, right? They started becoming now arrogant, right? They stopped proclaiming, oh, China's the best, we have the best economy, we lifted, millions and millions of people from poverty, 600 million or whatever, we're much better than the US. Like, they're not being humble anymore, right? They're being arrogant again. And you're going to see the same thing happen again. They're being protectionist again too, right? You're boycotting all these foreign brands, you're banning all these foreign companies, all the foreign entertainment and stuff. So you're going to see history repeat itself again, right? Like Chinese people, again, becoming arrogant, losing their humility, and yeah, just becoming protectionist again, super nationalistic again, right? And you're going to see the same thing happen, and China's going to fall behind eventually again because of this, because of they're not being humble, and not being humble means you since you can't criticize the government, right? Since you can't criticize the government, then what can happen, right? You can't really improve. That's the thing, right? If you can't criticize your government, you can't really improve, right? Because we all know the thing is no government is perfect. No matter how great the CCP is, right? No matter how great a job they did at the economy, lifting people up from poverty, no matter how great they are at that, they're not perfect, right? We have to understand that, right? So they're not free from criticism, and criticizing is honestly the way to get yourself better, right? If you think you're perfect, there's no room to improve on, right? There's no room to improve on if you think you're already doing such a great job and you're perfect and you're patting yourself on the back. That's basically what Xi Jinping is doing right now, right? So of course, you always have to constantly improve yourself, right? And I think that Chinese government and what they're doing right now, they're kind of losing their way here, right? So I'm just being a patriot here. I want to improve China, and that's why I'm criticizing the CCP and the Chinese people right now. I just think that they're losing their humility. When you lose your humility, you start bragging about your China and everything. Oh, the infrastructure is so much better. Oh, it's so much safer. Oh, we don't have all those riots and stuff that the U.S. has. We're so much better and stuff like that. Like, if you keep bragging about yourself like that, you don't see any desire to improve your own society, right? I mean, you're comparing yourself to the U.S., right? Now, the U.S. is not a perfect democracy, obviously, right? One might not even call it democracy, right? I mean, you can win the presidency without even winning the popular vote. How is it a democracy? But the fact is, Chinese people use the U.S., think it's the top democracy, then they associate Canada and UK, all these Western countries with the U.S. By the way, we're pretty different from the U.S. in terms of how we elect people, right? And we have a bunch of different parties. The U.S. only has two, right? We have a bunch of different parties. We don't really particularly care who's the head of that party, right? Where the U.S. does. So there's a bunch of different differences between Canada, UK, and the U.S., but they all group them together. Chinese people always group us together in with the Americans, and then they label us a failure. Whatever the U.S. does, like the chaos, the riots and stuff like that, the gun shootings, like that's a failure of democracy. They call it a failure of democracy, when really that's specific to the U.S., right? It doesn't have anything to do with Canada, it doesn't have anything to do with UK, it's specific to the U.S. We don't have those issues. We have universal health care. They're the ones who have to pay the healthcare when they go bankrupt. Which, by the way, China doesn't have universal healthcare either, right? That's also another weird thing. Even though they're socialists, they don't have universal healthcare either. They still got to pay for their healthcare. U.S. has to pay for their healthcare. Americans have to pay, but Canadians we don't have to pay for that. UK doesn't have to pay for that. It's paid for with our taxes, right? So we don't have that issue. But yeah, we don't have the riots and police brutality, gun, mass shootings. We don't have those issues. That's limited to the U.S., but Chinese just kind of group us all together and call us, oh, that's the Western government failure, right? Even though the U.S. government's like totally different. But yeah, and they keep bragging about themselves, how they're much better in the U.S. and everything. And by extension, if they're better in the U.S., then they're better than all Western countries, right? Because they use the U.S. as kind of the gold standard of Western countries. So anyways, yeah, and you can say what you want about if they think that China is such a great place to live, then we still have a lot of Chinese immigrants trying to immigrate to the U.S. and to Western countries, right? If China was such a great country, why is there so many immigrants to Western countries, right? If China was such a great country, why don't we see more Western people immigrating to China, right? So you got to think about that, right? If they always say, oh, our country's perfect, we do everything the best, better than the U.S. Well, if that's the case, why aren't more Westerners immigrating to China? Right? Why are so many Chinese people emigrating out of it? So you gotta think about that. So I'm just saying, I just want to improve China, and I have to say, one way of improving is to acknowledging that you're not perfect, right? Acknowledging that you're not perfect is a way to improve yourself, so that you can constantly improve yourself, because no one's ever perfect, no country's ever perfect, no government's ever perfect. So you have a way to improve yourself, become even better than before, right? But it doesn't seem like that. It seems like Xi Jinping thinks, that all they want right now is all they care about right now is being better in the U.S. Which is kind of like not a high bar. So, I mean, I'm not even sure if they're better than Korea and Japan, honestly, when it comes to they brag about the 5G technology, cashless payments, all those kind of technology stuff, the high-speed bullet trains and stuff. Is that even better than Korea and Japan, who did those things years ago? No, right? I mean, in Korea and Japan, the Koreans and Japanese don't brag about that. They don't brag about the technology that they've had for a long, long time, right? But Chinese people, once they get it, they're like, oh yeah, we're the greatest. Yeah, our infrastructure is the greatest. Look at us. We developed so fast, so much better than America, right? So, yeah, that's just kind of my advice to Chinese people. Just, you have to stay humble. Like, don't lose your humility. Once you lose your humility, start bragging about your country all the time, then, you saw what happened with the Qing Dynasty. Century of humiliation happened, right? Once you started getting complacent, right? But yeah, that's my thoughts about everything so far. The whole China, America, Westerner stuff going on, and yeah, I just wanted to lay my thoughts out. So that's it. Thanks for watching.